Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome in to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Thursday, November 12th, and that means it is opening day of the Masters. I know this is the baseball podcast, but I just wanted to give a shout out to the Masters currently taking place this weekend in November here in the fall. Of course, it was postponed from its normal April start date. So this is the first time in Masters history that it will be taking place in the fall. And I'm looking forward to how that's going to change things. Whether the winds change, there's going to be no spectators for the first time in the tournament's history. So how does that dictate how the players play the course, if there's any changes or what the deal is? But I am certainly fascinated. And College Game Day for ESPN is going to be taking place down there as well this Saturday. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, those have not overlapped before due to the seasons, but this weekend in 2020, things are crazy, so we're going to see things we've never seen before. But back to baseball here. We got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about the awards that have recently been handed out: Rookie of the Year, Manager of the Year, Cy Young. I'm going to give you guys my way too early predictions or preview for who I think could win the awards in 2021. And then we'll finish off today's episode kind of giving you guys the updates on what's going on out there in regards to qualifying offers, what that means for free agency markets, potentially how it relates to the trade market, and all of that good stuff. So let's jump right into it here, starting out with the Rookie of the Year award. You guys know I've been talking about it. The winners of these awards pretty much were known coming into the announcement, but how they won the award certainly was a bit surprising. And in the American League, Kyle Lewis won the award, of course, but he was a unanimous decision, which was a little bit surprising. I mean, usually there's one or two, goofballs out there who decide not to do it just so he's not unanimous. But Kyle Lewis was so impressive this year. He got all 30 first-place votes. In second place was Luis Robert. Like we discussed, he got 27 of 30 second-place votes. And then from there, it was a big drop to Christian Javier, Sean Murphy, Willie Castro, and a few other guys got a handful of third-place 1-point votes moving forward. So Kyle Lewis winning the award is not the surprise, but I did want to look at other American League or National League Rookie of the Years that had won by unanimous decision. And honestly, after doing some research, it's a bit more common than I had anticipated. And 2020, of course, Kyle Lewis. And 2019, it happened just a year ago in the American League with Yordan Alvarez for the Houston Astros, winning unanimously. Before that, in 2017, you had both leagues have unanimous winners with Aaron Judge and Cody Bellinger. And then if you continue back, I mean, since 2011, it's been pretty unanimous, actually. But then before that, it was a bit more sporadic. So just looking at the names here and maybe how Kyle Lewis compares, there's a lot of big names on here. So it looks like his career could be in great shape moving forward. So once again, Kyle Lewis, Yordan Alvarez, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, Corey Seager, Chris Bryant in 2015, Jose Abreu 2014, Mike Trout, Craig Kimbrell, Evan Longoria, and then all the way back to 2001, you get Albert Pujols, Scott Rowland, Nomar Garciaparra, Derek Jeter, Raul Mondesi, Tim Salmon, Mike Piazza, Sandy Alomar Jr., Benito Santiago, Mark McGwire, Vince Coleman, Carlton Fisk, Willie McCovey, Orlando Cepeda, and Frank Robinson back in 1956. So only a handful. I mean, you're looking at 15 to 20 since 2011. There have been, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the last 10 years, and then about 15 previously before that. So rookies are coming up, and they're showing that you can certainly put an impressive campaign together right off the bat, and you no longer have to, adjust to big league pitching, or he's going to struggle when he's brought up right away. A lot of these up-and-coming prospects are showing you can have immediate success. So Kyle Lewis wins the award this year. I wanted to look at 2021 and give you guys, again, my way too early predictions or previews on what's going on. And the name at the top of the list in the American League, if you can get a futures bet on him that's relatively of value, anything in the plus category, that would be Randy Arozarena. Because, yes, Arozarena is still considered a rookie in 2021, even though he had a historic postseason in 2020, because postseason at-bats do not count towards rookie eligibility. And if you look at it, the Rays didn't call him up until August 30th, which means he only had 81 career regular season at-bats, which is certainly below the rookie threshold heading into the next year. So he could be a lead for the MVP, the Rookie of the Year. He set so many records in the postseason. He had the record for hits, home runs, total bases, and of course, you're penciling him in for Rookie of the Year right in the middle of that Tampa Bay lineup all year long. But a few other gentlemen who could potentially knock him off. We're looking at the likes of Nick Madrigal for the White Sox. He had a separated shoulder this year. If he didn't have the injury, he would have exceeded the limits, but since he missed time and only had 103 at-bats, he is still considered a rookie in 2021. He hit .340 this year with only 7 strikeouts and 103 at-bats. I mean, 7 in today's game. That is just fascinating, the bat control, the way he's able to put it in play. So I don't know if he hits .340 next year, but he's certainly going to be in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. Let's see. Ryan Mountcastle for the Orioles. He received some third-place votes this year. He hit .333 with 5 home runs, but his 126 at-bats keep him eligible for the Orioles. And if he has another solid year offensively, he could be in the conversation. And then I look at a couple of pitchers, starting off with Nate Pearson. Of course, Pearson, he had an injury he was dealing with in Toronto this year. He was unable to go in the postseason, which is when they were looking at him most. He had elbow tightness in August, and, the injury only limited him to 18 innings, which, of course, is under the rookie threshold. But in those 18 innings, he certainly flashed the stuff to be really effective at the big league level and have success like we saw some other individuals this year. And another pitcher I have is Tristan McKenzie. Tristan plays for the Cleveland Indians, and he threw, 33 1/3 innings in Cleveland this year, struck out 42 and only walked 9. He's been dealing with a handful of injuries in his career. He was limited in 2018. He was off the mound entirely in 2019. So although he is a bit older, he has the ability to stay rookie eligible due to the injuries. And if he's finally healthy, I think he has the stuff to be in the conversation. So there's a few other gentlemen who are injured or up and coming, recent draft picks that could certainly be in the conversation. But I think those guys at the top of the list are going to be the favorites heading into 2021 for the American League. And now transitioning over to the National League, the 3 finalists were Devin Williams of Milwaukee, Alec Bohm of the Philadelphia Phillies, and Jake Cronenworth of the Padres. And Devin Williams took home the award in a pretty tight race. He got 14 first-place votes, so nobody took home the majority. Alec Bohm had 9 first-place votes, and Jake Cronenworth had 6 first-place votes. But Bohm and Cronenworth split second and third-place votes, so they finished tied for second place with 74 points apiece behind Devin Williams. And then there was a large drop-off to Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, Sixto Sanchez, and the likes in the National League. So Devin Williamson, I called it, guys. He was absolutely filthy this year. After looking at some sabermetrics and analytics, his changeup moves as much, if not a little bit more, vertically and horizontally than Otavio, a left-handed reliever for the New York Yankees. So think about that. A left-handed reliever with a pretty nasty slider is getting the same movement as Williams is from his right-handed changeup. So his changeup he's throwing is essentially a left-handed breaking ball, a good one at that, coming from the right side. Nobody's seen anything like this in baseball, in my opinion. I mean, changeups, yeah, they used to move a little bit, but above-average horizontal and above-average vertical break leads to the opponents hitting 2 for 62, which is 0.32 this year on Williams' changeup, and that was the lowest batting average against a pitch this year. Zach Plesac, 0.69 against his slider. Trevor Bauer, 0.75 against his slider, but 0.32 against Devin Williams' changeup. And if you look at some video online of the movement on his changeup and then an overlay of Otavio coming from the left side, you start to understand why big league hitters have yet to adjust to this, because nobody's seen anything like this before. Nobody's seen a ball thrown by a right-handed hitter break like it's a left-handed breaking ball. So, oh man, shout out to Devin Williams. Alec Baum, he had a huge push, finished in second place, got the most second-place votes. So I'm giving him the tiebreaker over Cronenworth, and he's going to be good for a long time for the Philadelphia Phillies. But who could take home the award in 2021? Let's look at a couple of gentlemen here on the National League side of things, starting with the offensive contenders. I like the Dylan Carlson for the Cardinals, of course. He was called up this year. He had a bit of a bumpy debut. Did hit for some power in the final couple of weeks in the regular season, and then hit cleanup in the playoffs for him. So Carlson was 20 at-bats under the rookie threshold. He's still one of the game's top prospects, and for him to be in the lineup every day next year and have the experience that he has from 2020, I think he can make some adjustments this offseason and come back even stronger in 2021 to position himself as a potential favorite for the award. Next up, I have Ke'Bryan Hayes. Ke'Bryan Hayes led rookie position players with 1.7 WAR this past season. He hit .376 in 24 games following his September call-up. He played Gold Glove defense there at third base. He came up through the minors as an outfielder, so has defensive versatility. This guy over 162, the Pittsburgh Pirates may have found somebody that's actually worth hanging on to and can help them win some ball games moving into next summer. You also have Christian Pache for the Atlanta Braves. We saw Adam Duvall's injury put him into the lineup for the postseason. He had a home run, a couple of walks, some strikeouts, up and down offensively, but played fantastic defense. He's a plus defender, one of the best center fielders in the game based on Saber metrics already in his short time. So if he takes over for Ender Inciarte, ends up playing every day, depending on how it goes offensively, and with that offensive lineup in Atlanta, he could be hitting 7th, 8th, or 9th, which makes you see more fastballs than you're accustomed to. And if he's able to take advantage of those, he's in for a solid season next year. And a couple of pitchers to keep an eye out on. They are both in the National League East. First, I have Sixto Sanchez. I mean, even if you include postseason innings, he still didn't even hit 50. He had 39 in the regular season, so he'll be allowed to still be a rookie next year. Now, he started out extremely hot and then did cool off. You know, you could say limp to the finish for 2020. He got a third-place vote, but there was some conversation earlier in the year that he could actually win the award. But Sixto, he continues to impress. If an easy 100 miles an hour, I think he could be right up there with a full season of starts. And then the other gentleman is Ian Anderson. Again, he only threw 51 innings, and because that's under the threshold for what they're looking for in regards to rookie status, he's going to be good to go for 2021. And everybody knows how he did last year, 9 earned runs in 51 innings. He could very well be the team's number 2, depending on how Soroka comes back from that Achilles injury. So I think he's going to be certainly in the conversation of Rookie of the Year candidates in 2021. You're looking at some younger guys such as Joey Bart, Mackenzie Gore, potentially Spencer Howard as being some dark horse candidates. But I think we discussed the guys who are going to win it next year. I mean, Randy Arozarena in the American League certainly has to be the favorite early on. And then I like Dylan Carlson in the National League because I think Anderson and Sanchez pitchers are a little bit too susceptible to the injury to go the distance and have yourself be considered a favorite. But that'll do it here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll take a break right now and listen to a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back on the other side, we'll get into Manager of the Year. Who won in the American League, who won in the National League, and then we'll take a look, see if we can look into the crystal ball and predict 2021 and who's going to win the awards next year. So thanks for listening, everyone. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Thursday, November 12th. Hopefully everybody's enjoying a beautiful week out there, wherever you are. Here in the Northeast, we've been getting rained on pretty hard the last couple of days, trying to stay dry up here, but thank goodness it is not snow yet. I know there are some of you out there who have dealt with winter coming in. Jack Frost already made an appearance. Luckily here, we're still in the 60s, heading to the 50s, and I'll take an inch of rain over a foot of snow any time of the year. So, but let's jump back into baseball. But before I do that, head to social media. I know I ask you guys every episode. Check us out, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, GSMC Baseball, as well as GSMC Podcast Network. We certainly appreciate it as we continue to grow here within the network. So leave a review, leave a rating, write a review, do all of the above. We very much appreciate it. But jumping back into the awards here for 2020, we have also seen Manager of the Year be announced over the past couple of days here since I talked to you guys last on Monday. And let's start out in the National League, where I think we all predicted it out there. Don Mattingly took home the award, and he took home 20 out of 30 first-place votes. But the surprising thing was that 9 out of 15 National League managers received votes. I mean, either first, second, or third, but they received multiple votes, at least 9 guys in the National League. So 20 out of 30, Mattingly was pretty much looked at as a consensus winner at the top, but beneath him, there was a ton of balance across the board that was honestly a bit surprising. So looking first into Don Mattingly, he, of course, this is his first Manager of the Year award for him personally in his 10th year as a manager, so it's impressive that he was able to navigate 2020. Of course, he dealt with a COVID-19 outbreak early in the season, in the first week after the exhibition games in Atlanta, and then heading into Philadelphia. So the Marlins had 18 players make their big league debut in 2020. And overall, this is probably the most fascinating number here, excuse me, is the Marlins made 174 roster moves during the 2020 season. 174. That's insane. My God, they played 60 games. They didn't even play 162, and they had 174 moves. So, my goodness, it was, impressive what Don Mattingly was able to do. He had finished second in his career before back in 2013 when he was manager of the Dodgers. But this, of course, was his first victory, and he was the third Marlins manager to win the award. Joe Girardi did so in 2006, and Jack McKeon did all the way back in 2003. So taking the Marlins to their first postseason since, I believe it was 2006, or no, their first winning season since 2009, and their first playoff berth since 2003. That's right, Girardi went 500 with a ragtag bunch of guys back in 2006 to win the award. So nobody expected the Marlins to be ahead of this pace. Nobody expected them to be in the conversation around the playoffs or manager of the year or any of that stuff. So let's now kind of transition and preview 2021 and what I think could potentially happen. And this is the case really where I think looking at the National League, manager of the year typically goes to the manager of the team that most exceeds expectations or has high expectations and then exceeds those expectations to a pretty high level. And looking at the National League, I mean, starting out kind of going division by division, who could potentially be up for the award? If you're looking at the National League East, I don't think Brian Snedeker of the Braves is going to be winning the award just because they continue to be a machine. They continue to be at the top of the National League East. So with expectations where they are, he can only kind of be looked at having a poor season. It's unfortunate, but, heavy is the crown that the king wears, right? So looking at the rest of the teams in the division, though, if the Marlins have another fantastic summer, Don Mattingly could be up for the award. I do think a prime candidate could be Joe Girardi of the Philadelphia Phillies. He was one of the 6 guys who did not receive votes this past year, along with Luis Rojas of the New York Mets, because those guys were certainly disappointments in the National League East, and even Martinez there in Washington, who I believe should have won the award a year ago but did not because the postseason isn't counted, but maybe he did. I can't forget. You guys can let me know in the comments on that one. But the Phillies, the Mets, and the Nationals, all of their managers, I think, are key candidates for Manager of the Year in 2021. Because if these teams are able to go from 4 or 8 games under 500 to over 500 and making the playoffs, that's how you get involved in this award. So I think that, who could potentially be at the top there? The Mets, we'll have to wait and see with free agency. I mean, JT Realmuto could go to the Mets or the Phillies. Stroman just accepted the qualifying offer, which we'll touch on a little bit more coming up in the 4th segment. So those 3 teams in the National League, or the National League East. Then you go to the National League Central. You're looking at the Cubbies with David Ross. He finished 3rd this year with 25 points. So if they have another solid year next year, I don't know if he'll be able to improve enough to win the award. There in St. Louis, you had Mike Schilt get a couple of votes late since they made the playoffs. You had David Bell in Cincinnati, Craig Counsell in Milwaukee, and then the guy in Pittsburgh, we'll just leave you nameless because I don't think you have a chance. So my biggest takeaway here could be Craig Counsell, the Brewers, if they bounce back, because with the Reds losing Trevor Bauer, I don't think they're going to be as positioned this year as they were last year to be successful. They do have some pieces. So honestly, I don't think there's many candidates in the National League Central for this award as there are in the NL East. Give me the Brewers, maybe the Reds. If they get 100 wins here after losing Bauer, that, of course, would be impressive. And then lastly here in the National League West, you have, of course, Jace Tingler, who finished 2nd in this year's voting. He received 6 first-place votes and got a total of 71 points this year because San Diego was extremely impressive. So I have him as a potential candidate because coming off a World Series, David Roberts, if you guys are number 1 like you should be again, I don't think that's enough to win the award. I think that's just, that's what we expected. The Dodgers are loaded type of conversation. But Gabe Kapler out there for the Giants could potentially be in play. And then the Rockies and Diamondbacks, I'll wait and see till the offseason before I give them any hopes. Honestly, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, for those teams next year. So my favorites would be Girardi for the Phillies, Rojas for the Mets. You're looking at David Bell for Cincinnati, potentially Counsell in Milwaukee, Tingler in San Diego, and Kapler out in San Francisco. But My money right now, because I'm an optimist, is on the Philadelphia Phillies. They make moves this offseason. They get better. They make the playoffs, and Joe Girardi wins the award next summer. So you guys can call me on that. I'll probably be way off. They'll finish under 500 for the 10th year in a row or whatever it is, and I'll look like a silly expert or analyst on here. But I'll go Phillies and Girardi winning the award next summer. So transitioning now into the American League, Kevin Cash for the Tampa Bay Rays wins the award. Of course, most recently, he's been hit on pretty good for pulling Blake Snell in Game 7 of the World Series and having that backfire with the bullpen being unable to close things down. Or Game 6 of the World Series and close things down. But he took home 22 out of 30 first-place votes for a pretty commanding 65-point victory over Rick Renteria of the Chicago White Sox, who was let go in favor of Tony La Russa this offseason, which we talked about at length a few episodes ago. So if you didn't hear that episode, click on back, since all episodes are backlogged here at the GSMC Baseball Podcast, and they're on demand. You can listen to them whatever you'd like. So check out that episode to listen to my take on La Russa versus Renteria. You also had Montoyo in Toronto, Bob Melvin, Rocco Baldelli, and Dusty Baker receive votes here in the American League. So Kevin Cash won the award this year because coming into this season, it was looked at like the Yankees, the Astros, the Twins, all of those were kind of known entities in regards to making a push in the American League. But the Tampa Bay Rays were known as a wild card team. Hey, you know, they're a solid team, not great. Well, a 40-20 record in 60 games exceeded expectations to the point where Cash was able to win the award. So that's where I'm saying a top team doesn't eliminate their manager. It just raises the bar of expectations. I mean, the Dodgers coming off a 41-win season, they're going to have to maintain that winning percentage for, Roberts to even be in the conversation. So on the American League side of things, looking at the Yankees, the Rays, I don't think either of those managers, Boone or Cash, will be open for the award once again next year due to the expectations that will be placed on those squads. Montoyo up there in Toronto potentially has an opportunity if they continue to develop and get Pearson back healthy, continue to get these young offensive players rolling. If they make the playoffs for back-to-back years, if they have a solid season, I would put Montoyo up there right at the top of the list for candidates in 2021. I would also pencil in Alex Cora. I mean, in Baltimore, sorry guys, I don't think you're close to that rebuild stage yet where you'll be in the conversation. But Boston, going back to Cora, kind of, tanking this year, so to speak, moving on from Betts, Price, kind of resetting. I think if Cora comes in and possibly gets that locker room back to 500, back to playoff consideration, you're going to have him in the conversation for the award as well, even though that pains me, and I talked about that as well in a previous episode. So scroll on back, guys. There's a lot of great content still available if this is your first time joining us. If you're new to the program, welcome. But like I said, if not, you've heard this. If you are new, check it out. Scroll on back. But in the American League Central, the Minnesota Twins, of course, Rocco Baldelli, they've won the American League Central a couple years in a row, so there will be high expectations in Minnesota again. There in Chicago, Rick Renteria, he was let go after finishing in second place for Tony La Russa, who I would potentially put on this list if the White Sox take that next step in their development, if they're able to hold on down the stretch. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do that this year, and I think Renteria may have even had a better chance to take home the award. But they're in Cleveland. I mean, you have Terry Francona, who wants to manage. He's dealing with some health issues. Nobody knows exactly where he's going to fall for the start of 2021, or if there will be an interim manager. What's taking place there? Then you have Kansas City and Detroit, which will most likely continue to be at the bottom of that division. So it will be a 3-team race in the Central. And if one team really separates themselves from the others, that's where this year each of those teams were bundled up 36-24. And then the White Sox and Indians right behind the Twins had one game back. It really didn't differentiate any manager from the other, which kind of took votes and spread them out and basically said, okay, Kevin Cash has been super impressive. All of these guys have been good, but not one of them stands out above the rest. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Cash. But out in the American League West in Oakland, I think Bob Melvin has an opportunity. I know they won the division that year, but if they continue to push and be successful, I think Bob Melvin could be up for the award again next year. Dusty Baker got one third-place vote for what he did in Houston this summer. They finished under 500, but had a solid postseason. So if they come back and win 90 games, 95 games, Dusty Baker will certainly be in the conversation. But then also, I think the LA Angels. The Angels, if they're able to finally put it together, finally get over 500, Joe Madden is certainly going to have to be in the conversation. And Joe Madden has won the award a couple of times in the past. And again, if he's able to take a 26-34 Angels team to the postseason for the first time in a number of years, he's going to be your winner. So Joe Madden, he's got it for the taking if they're able to put it together. If not him, I think Baldelli or La Russa in the Central, or you're looking at Montoyo up in Toronto being the favorite as well. But shout out once again this year, Kevin Cash and Don Mattingly winning the awards for 2020. Both of those guys certainly deserved it as those teams had fantastic summers. But that'll wrap it up here for the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll pause one more time here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but we'll be back after the break to talk about the Cy Young Awards. No surprises in the victors there. We'll get into the voting, make some way too early predictions since a lot of people moved during the offseason, but we'll get into it. We'll talk about it. Stick around, everyone. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It's Thursday, November 12th. We are exactly 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving. I know everybody out there is looking forward to gathering with friends and families. I'll just say my part here. Continue to stay safe, stay healthy. I know CDC recommendations or guidelines say try to be outside. If you can't be outside because of weather, try to be at least 6 feet apart. Try to wear your mask. Try not to get together with extended family. But I know a lot of us out there are getting a little stir-crazy, looking forward to the holidays, time with family. But we just have to remember to be as safe as we possibly can. Take the precautions that you feel are necessary and enjoy yourself, because certainly mental health is a big thing going on right about now, and we all want to be happy and continue to trend here moving forward. But if you haven't checked out any other podcasts within the podcast network, please do so. I mean, type in GSMC into the search icon wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, as they've been continuing to transition more and more into the podcast game. You also have Pandora starting to dabble into the podcast world, and of course, Apple Podcasts, which I believe is still the biggest platform, but fact check me on that one. You might as well. But wherever you're listening, type in GSMC. Check out podcasts that are about, I don't know, politics, relationship, books, cars, whatever it is you're into, whatever your hobby is, there's a podcast for you within the network. That's a lot of fun to listen to. But here we are for our third segment, and we're talking about the Cy Young Award that was handed out last night on Wednesday evening. We called these winners as well. I think we're 6 for 6 so far on awards here based on my predictions. I know we hit on the Rookie of the Year. The only one is Don Mattingly, but I'm pretty sure I predicted him as well. So that makes me 6 for 6 with Jose Abreu and Freddie Freeman could complete the sweep tonight on Thursday nights. I believe they're announcing that. Or maybe it's over the weekend. I'm not sure here off the top of my head. But Shane Beiber wins the award in the American League. He received 30 out of 30 first place votes. So it was a unanimous decision for Shane Beiber in first place. A total of 210 points for him. I guess we could call him points. But Kenta Maeda finished second. He got 18 out of 30 second-place votes. And then Hin-Yin Ryu finished behind him in third. Excuse me. And then Garrett Cole came in fourth place, followed by Dallas Keuchel and Lance Lynn, kind of rounding out the top six there. So Shane Beiber, he wins in unanimous decision, similar to Kyle Lewis in the Rookie of the Year conversation. So who else has won the Cy Young unanimously? How often does this happen? Well, I'm glad you asked. I was able to break it down by league, and the last time it happened in the American League, it was Johan Santana. He was unanimous back in 2006 as well as 2004. He was obviously dominant through that 3-year stretch, winning 2 unanimous Cy Youngs. That's pretty amazing. And then you go back to the back-to-back years with Pedro Martinez winning in Boston, 1999 and 2000. Everybody knows that one season in there that's known as potentially the greatest season a pitcher has ever had due to it being during the live ball steroid era, and Pedro was still able to shove and win unanimous Cy Youngs. But Roger Clemens has won 2 of them, one in 1998 with the Toronto Blue Jays, and then another one all the way before that in 1986 with Boston. You also had Ron Guidry in New York in 1978, and then Denny McLain in 1968 for Detroit in the American League. Then on the National League side of things, not a long list here as well. Clayton Kershaw was the most recent one to do it across both leagues. He did it in 2014 for the LA Dodgers. Prior to that, you had Roy Halladay in 2010 for the Philadelphia Phillies, and then Jake Peavy, 2007 for San Diego. Randy Johnson did it with the Diamondbacks in 2002. Greg Maddux, 1995. Greg Maddux, 1994. And then before that, you had Earl Horshizer, Dwight Gooden, Rick Sutcliffe, Steve Carlton, Bob Gibson, and Sandy Koufax in the 60s did it 3 times. So I believe it's only done 24 times in the history of baseball. And Shane Beiber, very impressive in his 2020 season as well. But he was the 5th Cleveland Indian to win the award. He was behind Corey Kluber, who won it twice for the Indians in 2014 and 2017. You also had Cliff Lee win the award in 2008, CC Sabathia in 2007, and then all the way back in 1972, it was Gaylord Perry winning the award for the Indians. So Shane Beiber adds his list as the 5th guy to win the award. But as you look at things here and you look at Cleveland, I found a very interesting kind of subtext on what's going on here, and potentially the best pitching coach in the history of baseball, because Carl Willis is the Indians pitching coach, and he has now coached 5 different Cy Young Award winners. He coached CC Sabathia, Cliff Lee, Felix Hernandez, Rick Porcello, and now Shane Beiber, excuse me. So Beiber being the 5th one to this list, you guys out there are probably going, really? The best pitching coach of all time? Well, the only other gentleman to coach more Cy Young winners is Leo Mazzoni of the Atlanta Braves. But Leo Mazzoni did his 6 awards with 3 players. He had Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz win a total of 6 awards during their time in Atlanta. And now Carl Willis gets his 5th different award winner for 5 total awards. So 1 less award, but 2 different pitchers. I think it just goes to show his ability to work with all types of different mechanics, all types of different deliveries, flows, styles, pitch sequences, and still be able to get the best out of his players, because Shane Beiber, he's gone from a college walk-on to a 5th starter to an All-Star Game MVP to an MLB Triple Crown winner from the pitching side of things, meaning he had 8 wins, best in the American League, 1.63 ERA, best in the American League, and 122 strikeouts, which was best in the American League. So, of course, his career has had a ton of twists and turns, but Carl Willis, I think, deserves a ton of credit for what he did with Beiber, for what he's done with people in the past. It's just fascinating. I mean, Bieber's dominance goes up and down the list. He's just, he was first in batting average allowed, 167, first in slugging percentage allowed, strikeouts per 9, second in innings pitched, and he's only 25 years old, which makes him the youngest Indian Cy Young winner. So those other 4 guys were all older than 25 at the time for which he won the award here in 2020. So 122 strikeouts were a club record over first 12 starts, and they were the 6th most in Major League history over 12 starts, and he recorded at least 8 strikeouts in all 12 starts, which is the longest streak to start a season. It passed Bob Feller's 1946 club record. So the awards and honors for Beiber just go on and on here, as he had the most impressive season. And hopefully you got on him early, because his odds early in the gambling world, if you're allowed to do that out there, would have won you a ton of money, because they just bottomed out as the season continued on. But transitioning now to the National League side of things, Trevor Bauer took home the award. He got 27 out of 30 first-place votes, so not unanimous. Yu Darvish finished second place with 3 first-place votes. He got the remaining first-place votes. So Trevor Bauer was first with 201 points. Yu Darvish came in second place with 123, followed by Jacob deGrom with 89 points, and then Dinelson Lamet and Max Fried rounded out the top 5 on the National League side of things. So Trevor Bauer, congratulations. He was the first Cincinnati Red to win the award, which I found absolutely stunning. I mean, the Reds had never had a Cy Young winner, which made them one of 4 active teams without a Cy Young winner, and they were the only team to be founded prior to 1961. That's how I wanted to say that. So the only team founded before 1961 and not have a Cy Young winner, that's just fascinating. So even though Bauer went 5-4 this year, as we know, Cincinnati didn't start off that hot, and they were under 500 until, Bauer and others really kicked it into gear and were able to make a postseason push. But he was 5-4. He did have a National League best 1.73 ERA in his 11 starts. He helped the Reds reach the postseason for the first time since 2013. And honestly, I was pulling for Trevor Bauer because I enjoy his personality on the field. I know he rubs players the wrong way with his social media interaction, his interaction with the media, some of the things he says on different podcasts and different media outlets. He can rub people the wrong way, but going out there and backing it up and dominating was one of the best things, we watched this year, because he struck out 173 innings, and he was animated on the field. He let you know he got that K strut down. He was just electric to watch. The guy was grunting after pitches, but he knew he had it going, and he was just trying to ride the wave here, because Bauer really struggled in Cincinnati after he was acquired via trade last season in 2019. He went 2-5 with a 6.39 ERA in 10 starts, and then went out with an injury, came back, and just continued to struggle. So this offseason, he found himself getting healthy. He found himself getting stronger, working on his delivery, his pitch sequence, how to hide the baseball and disguise some of his looks and work all the quadrants. And we obviously saw it lead to success this year because he was absolutely tremendous. I mean, he had a .79 whip, which is walks and hits per innings pitched. So under one guy getting on base per inning, and anything under 1.3 is being graded as above average or exceptional at the major league level. So if you're under that mark, you're doing well. And obviously being almost half of that at .79 is a tremendous season for Trevor Bauer. So both of these guys who win the award are from the state of Ohio, which we come to find out was also the birthplace and the resting place of the Cy Young. So Mr. Young, who passed away in Ohio, I believe it was 50 or 60 years ago, now at this point here in 2020. But the award, back to Ohio, and both Shane Beiber and Trevor Bauer did acknowledge that. They did mention that they want to keep it in Ohio moving forward, specifically in Shane Bieber's case, because Trevor Bauer is now a free agent and free to sign with any team. So, ultimately, where does he end up and how much money does he end up getting? Because coming off of a Cy Young victory, being the top free agent arm, I don't think he's going to see Garrett Cole money, but he could certainly potentially see that Yu Darvish type of contract, close to 5 and 100, 5 and 90 or 80, and if not, certainly that Jake Arrieta money of 3 and 75, 25, 30 a year. I don't think is unreasonable to ask for Trevor Bauer coming off of Cy Young and looking to capitalize on a contract here. And depending on where he ends up, you got to put him as a talk of being in the favorite for next season. Of course, in the American League, Bieber will be back. He'll be talked about. Now, there will be some movement. The trade activity this offseason could be ferocious based on what we're hearing, and we're going to talk about that coming up here in the fourth and final segment. But, Maeda's back, Ryu's back, Bieber's back on the American League side of things. Of course, you got the likes of Jose Barrios possibly in the conversation. Garrett Cole isn't going anywhere, so he'll be a favorite heading into the 2021 season as well. And then on the National League side of things, again, depending on trades, Jacob deGrom is going to be right at the top there once again. You're going to be having Max Scherzer back in the conversation after he was out this season. Steven Strasburg in Washington missed this year with an injury. He'll be at the top of the list. But you have Yu Darvish, Dinelson Lamet, and then a few other up-and-comers. Adam Wainwright potentially, although he had he's up there in age, he had a tremendous year. So Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler with the Phillies. It's certainly too early to have that conversation just due to trades, free agency, injuries that will take place throughout the season. But shout out to Shane Bieber, shout out to Trevor Bauer, both winning the award, both earned it. We predicted it, here at the podcast, so that makes us 6 for 6 on the awards thus far, and we're certainly looking forward to the MVPs getting announced here in the next couple of days so we can discuss those on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. But that'll wrap it up here for the third segment. We'll step aside one last time here for another word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we'll get into the latest news and notes, qualifying offers, who's accepted, who didn't, free agents, potential trades. We'll talk about it all. So stick around, everyone. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for listening today, everyone. I know you guys can listen to whatever you'd like out there. it's probably the weekend by the time you're checking this out. If not, if it's Thursday, we appreciate it very much. Do us a favor, please rate and review the podcast. I know I ask you guys every time, but it really does help us within Apple Podcasts algorithm. The more reviews you get, the more it helps your exposure. It basically feeds it to other people who are listening to other genres or other podcasts within the genre and things along those lines. So if you could and you haven't done so yet, click that 5-star button. It's the one all the way on the right as you scroll down, and I would very much appreciate it. But let's jump into the fourth and final segment. We're talking about qualifying offers, how that relates to free agency, the trade market, and basically what we're looking forward to here over the next couple of weeks as free agency gets underway for Major League Baseball. And starting off with the 6 free agents who were extended qualifying offers. And for those of you who aren't aware, a qualifying offer is basically a 1-year contract worth $18.9 million. So a 1-year, $19 million deal. It is completely guaranteed. So basically, if you're extended that offer and you accept it, that's your deal for the next year. If you decline the qualifying offer, it essentially tags and adds a draft pick to your price, basically, right? So if you decline the qualifying offer, which 4 out of 6 individuals did, and just for, the conversation here, JT Realmuto of the Phillies declined the qualifying offer, which now means the Phillies will receive a draft pick in the second round next year if he signs when moving to a new team, or after competitive round B is what they call it. So basically, you offer a guy a contract, 1 year, $19 million. If he says yes, okay, you have the player on that deal moving forward. And if he says no, and you lose that player, you now, instead of getting nothing, get a 4th, 5th round pick back for the deal. So it's a way to kind of cover teams. If they were to have 5, 6, 7 free agents all in one season, it's a way to kind of, restash the inventory, so to speak, with draft picks down the line instead of, big leaguers. But JT Realmuto, he did decline his qualifying offer, so he will become a free agent that will be available out there for anybody moving forward. Same with the Astros' George Springer. He declined his offer. Yankees' DJ LeMahieu and Reds starting pitcher Trevor Bauer have all declined their offers. So they will all be free agents, but the Reds, Yankees, Phillies, and Astros will now receive at least a little bit of compensation if they do not re-sign these players. But there were 2 guys who did accept the qualifying offer that were a bit surprising. And honestly, every now and then you get 1 or 2 guys who say, yeah, $19 million guaranteed based off of the year I had or what I'm looking at over the course of the contract. I think that's a nice way to bet on myself, take it into the offseason next year, and still get that large contract with $19 million. But the first guy was Kevin Gausman, starting pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. He turned 30 in January, and he struck out a career-best 12 hitters per 9 innings. So there was talk that he was going to get some multi-year offers, but, I guess the price point was not where he wanted it, and he thought 1 at 20 is better than, 3 at 35, so to speak, that he can make up the difference and make up those $15 million over the life of, the next contract. But the bigger news and the biggest name to accept the qualifying offer was Marcus Stroman of the New York Mets. And Stroman, he did not play in 2020. He sat out due to COVID-19 concerns, which may have led to his decision to accept the offer because heading into free agency, coming off a missed season where nobody was able to see you, although it wasn't an injury, it's still the unknown of facing live hitters, live action, live game scenarios for the last 14, 15 months, dating back to 2019. So it was interesting to see him accept the offer, which means he will be with the New York Mets in 2021. He did have a solid 2019, a 3.22 ERA. So people were expecting him to be potentially the second best guy out there on the market. And now what does that leave the starting pitching market looking like? Well, if you talk to a few execs out there, they basically said, hey, there's a plan A minus, and then a plan C. Plan A, of course, being Trevor Bauer. Stroman and Gausman were plan A minus. They were kind of that second tier. And now everybody else is plan C. So the names after Trevor Bauer are now Masahiro Tanaka, Jake Odorizzi, Tyjon Walker. Those are probably your safest bets coming off of the 2020 season and how they performed. You then have a few options coming off of injury. Perhaps Corey Kluber or James Paxton, Jose Quintana, Cole Hamels all fit that mode coming off of injuries here in 2020 that could potentially bounce back moving into the future. And then you have guys who had down years that are still available, like Mike Minor, John Lester, Rick Porcello. Those guys at the starting pitching market. But now that you've taken Stroman and Gausman off the market and your next best option is potentially Tanaka or Odorizzi, this is where conversation that the trade market could pick up and could be heavier this offseason than in most seasons, because teams that are looking or have pitchers under control for 1 to 2 more years and are staring at teams that do not look to be competitive within that window, that's where a lot of these names will now become available. And we've seen teams sit on starters for too long. That starter subsequently have a poor start to the season, and the trade value goes down throughout the course of the year. We saw it this year with Mike Minor and a few other guys. So names that pop up as potential options that fit this mold that could move from the starting pitcher, caliber. Number one has to be Lance Lynn. I mean, he's only got 1 year, $8 million left, and Texas would love to have him, but Texas isn't going to be competing. So if you can get nice prospect pools for Lance Lynn just due to his money being only $8 million, I think you have to look at that long and hard as potentially moving him. Another guy who had a nice 2020 is Angels' Dylan Bundy. He's got 1 year left until free agency. You have John Gray from the Colorado Rockies as a potential guy who could be on the move. And then even Danny Duffy from the Royals. I know he's got a little bit more of a higher contract in regards to money owed, but he could potentially be on the move. And those are guys with 1 year left. Then you start to look at guys who potentially have 2 years of control that could be moved, depending on how the season starts to play out. You have the Rockies' Kyle Freeland. You got the Pirates' Joe Musgrove. The Tigers' Matthew Boyd, whose name you've heard over the past couple of years as a potential trade piece. Even with the Athletics and Sean Manaea, depending on how their 2021 is going and what their outlook looks like moving forward, he could potentially be had closer to the trade deadline. And then if you really want to start to reach, Blake Snell, 3 years, $39 million left. He won the Cy Young in 2018, but he has a backloaded contract where the Rays could potentially move on. And if you really only feel like he can make it 2 times through the lineup, why would you pay that guy $16 million a year by the end of his contract? So the Rays have done things like that in the past, and I really wouldn't be shocked if they make a move and trade Blake Snell. Now, of course, it would be too early. I think you hang on to him. I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked if it happened down there in Tampa Bay. And, starting pitchers aren't the only ones who are having conversation around trades and potentially being moved. I mean, this offseason is going to be a big one for guys, once again, in their last year of their contract. Right at the top of the list is Francisco Lindor. And there are more and more rumblings as the days go by here that it is almost quote-unquote likely that Francisco Lindor will be moved this offseason and has played his last game in an Indians uniform. So Francisco Lindor, he will turn 27 by the time the 2021 year starts, and he will be, as of now, eligible for free agency following next season. So who could potentially be a trade candidate for Francisco Lindor? And you're going to see the standard names that you always see here. And recently, the New York Mets are popping up in everybody's conversation. New owner Steve Cohen. It's going to be throwing money everywhere. Sign Real Muto, sign Springer, trade for Lindor, keep Stroman. Everybody in New York getting excited about the potential of them, spending money this offseason, and a lot of people are putting 2 and 2 together, where if you get Real Muto or Springer, it'll be a lot easier to persuade Francisco Lindor to sign long-term if he is traded to you guys there in New York. So the Mets are being pushed and being linked to every single free agent, every single big name right now, because they have money to spend. They have a new owner that's willing to spend it. And I look forward to the big boys playing in New York with the Yankees. You know, it's always been New York and then the Mets up there. But if the Mets are going to spend the cash, I think that's an interesting storyline to watch. The Yankees are another team tied to Lindor. Of course, they have the prospects. They have unlimited cash funds, so that contract would not be a big deal. Now, moving forward, it would be, okay, what do we do with Judge, Stanton? There's a few opt-outs coming down the line. If you have Lindor, is it just for a year? Is it a rental to try to go win it? What are you looking at? So a lot of next-level conversations happening potentially there in New York. But the other names, you got the Phillies. They need help at shortstop after they did not extend a qualifying offer to Didi Gregorius. So there's a potential transition there. You also have the Blue Jays, the Cardinals, and those 5 are the strongest candidates based on what is being heard across Major League Baseball right now. So, the Mets are looked at as the favorite. If you're the Phillies, I think you go all in to try to get Francisco Lindor. Even if it takes JT Realmuto walking away, if you're able to replace a superstar like JT with an even better and even greater superstar, in my opinion, Francisco Lindor, I think that offsets Bryce Harper. I think the energy and the attitude of both of those players would feed off of each other, and I think baseball could be a lot of fun in Philadelphia. And yes, you just gave up a ton of prospects to get JT to now let him walk. But honestly, you can't look in the past when, determining your moves in the future. And I think that giving up some prospects could be the way to go for Lindor. Although giving up more prospects for 1 year, Lindor, and then him walking would certainly be a worst-case scenario if you're a Phillies fan. But let's wrap up today's episode. The last couple of minutes here just talking about top free agents at every position. Of course, behind the dish, it's Real Muto. Where does he end up? People say the Mets or the Phillies being the top 2. At first base, you have Carlos Santana as the top free agent. He had a down year this year in Cleveland, but he has certainly been the mold of consistency when you look back at the last 10 years of his career. Second base, DJ LeMahieu won the batting title. Everybody knows that one. Let's see. Shortstop, they have Didi Gregorius. He took a 1 year, $14 million with the Phils, and he produced to the point where it looks like he's going to be getting more than that for an extended contract moving forward. Third base, you have Justin Turner. He's coming off the World Series title with the Dodgers, of course, wrapping up a 4 year, $64 million contract. I'm not sure he gets to that level, but I do think he gets a multi-year deal if he wants it. In left field, we have Marcell Ozuna as the top guy. He turned down, he turned down a 17.8 qualifying offer with the Cardinals, but he basically signed that same deal with the Braves. It went well, so now he should get that long-term deal. George Springer, your top guy in center field, and then your top right fielder, it's a bit thin here. You're looking at Ryan Braun, Adam Eaton, Josh Reddick, Jay Bruce. Kind of take your pick there on a bunch of guys. And then designated hitter Nelson Cruz, Edwin Encarnacion, Sin-Shu Chu. We talked about starting pitchers. Tanaka, Charlie Morton was a name that I didn't mention earlier that a lot of teams are interested in. If you're looking for some left-handed pitching, potentially J.A. Happ, James Paxton. A lot of relief pitchers available. That's probably the deepest group across Major League Baseball with Hendricks, Colomb, Green, Melanson, Holland, Kinsler, Rosenthal. And then from the left side, you have Hand, Alvarez, Doolittle, Loop, McGee. So a lot of relief pitching available out there, and thank goodness, because I'm a Phillies fan and they need it, but I know a lot of teams are looking for pitching help across the board. So that does it for today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Check us out on social media. I myself, KMiho20, across different platforms, Kevin Mahalik, and then, of course, GSMC, both the Baseball Podcast and the Podcast Network, as we appreciate you guys listening. But share us with your friends, one friend a week. That goes a long way as we continue to grow the numbers here and continue to bring you guys quality content day in and day out. But that'll do it for today. Thanks again, everyone. I'll talk to you guys again on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.